Welcome back to the Deep Dive. Today we are opening up a source that on its surface is remarkably brief, yet, philosophically just so dense.
It really is.
We've been handed a text titled A Guide to Life, or Dalil Irshadi and Al-Haya. And it doesn't read like an essay. It's more like a concentrated instruction manual.
Like a set of operating principles for existence, yeah.
Yeah.
Designed for, maximum efficiency in a way.
Exactly. It's a framework built around minimizing regret and maximizing awareness.
It's a distillation of wisdom, really. There's no fluff, no fanfare. And for you, the learner tuning in, I think this deep dive is really designed to be a shortcut.
A shortcut how?
Well, we're taking this complex philosophical architecture and trying to translate it into immediate, actionable insight. Our mission isn't just to summarize, it's to synthesize the guide's core wisdom.
And a lot of that seems to focus on these dualities it presents.
The sweet and the bitter, truth and illusion, absolutely. And then there's the crucial role of conscious choice, or worry, in determining whether we achieve what it calls abundant good.
What immediately strikes me, and I think it'll strike you too, is how motivational and intensely practical this guide is. It's not just telling us what paths to take.
No, it's about how we should calibrate our internal vision for the journey.
Right. It emphasizes internal choice, for sure, but also, and this is maybe the most surprising part for me, it elevates the profound importance of external companionship.
As a survival mechanism, not just a nice to have.
A literal survival mechanism. Okay, let's unpack this.
I think we have to approach this text with the seriousness it demands. It really centers on discerning reality, enduring necessary hardship, and then aligning ourselves ethically to secure that al-khair al-kathir, the abundant good.
And the real challenge for us, for anyone listening, is bridging that gap, isn't it?
What gap is that?
Taking these profound, really fundamental concepts like Weiwei, which is consciousness or vigilance, and its opposite, ghafla.
Heedlessness or spiritual sleepwalking.
Right. Taking those concepts and integrating them, not just intellectually, but practically, into the demanding, just chaotic rush of modern life.
That's the whole ballgame right there.
So today, we're going to spend significant time analyzing the guy's incredible metaphor of life as a musical performance, and really explore what happens when the instruments go silent.
And we'll look critically at that surprising argument for the weakness of cruelty, a paradox that I think shifts our entire relationship with suffering.
Absolutely. And we will dedicate a substantial segment to understanding why choosing the right company is presented here as a non-negotiable survival strategy, not just, a preference.
Let's start at the beginning.
So that sets a foundation that is just fundamentally aspirational. It doesn't begin with a list of prohibitions or warnings about evil. It starts with a call to love.
The foundational aspiration, the starting point, is longing and love for everything beautiful in life. That's ashok wal hub likuli ma huwa jame fil hayo.
And that feels like a very deliberate choice. Why start with love and longing?
Well, I think it's a critical psychological maneuver by the author. By grounding the entire framework in longing shok, which is this dynamic yearning and love hub for beauty, the guide establishes a positive beauty-seeking lens from the very start.
So it's not just a nice sentiment.
Oh, not at all. It's a
Yeah.
necessary engine. I mean, think about it. If you don't possess this inherent appreciation, this longing for the good parts of existence, any subsequent instruction about enduring the bitter parts is just going to fail.
It falls on deaf ears.
It does. This provides the initial motivation, the why, before it ever gets into the how.
It's the prerequisite for engagement. It essentially says you have to fundamentally want to be here, and you must recognize and appreciate the inherent beauty in the design of the world before we can even talk about how to play the game.
Exactly. Without that initial longing, the spiritual discipline that's required to walk consciously simply won't sustain you through the difficult stretches.
And that initial willingness, that sort of open heart, is then immediately tested by the nature of existence itself, which the guide describes using this really evocative metaphor.
Music.
Right, not a journey, not a puzzle, a performance.
Yeah, it doesn't describe life as a straight line or some fixed thing, but as a continuous performance.
The core detail here is just so insightful. It says that life or time passes with its sweet and bitter moments, like a musical performance.
And if we really lean into that metaphor, its implications are just profound. Music relies entirely on tension and release, on consonance and dissonance.
The contrast.
The contrast, the sweet notes, al-hulwa, the moments of harmony and joy, they're only meaningful because the bitter notes, al-murra, The challenges, the discord, the minor chords exist.
You know, if a piece of music was just major chords at the same volume, it would be.
Unbearably boring. It would be meaningless. It's the contrast that creates the beauty.
So in this framework, bitterness isn't a defect in the system.
No, it's a necessary condition for depth and for appreciation. The passage of time itself, Elmerd, is the constant rhythm, the unceasing tempo. We can't stop the music.
We can't. But the quality of the melody we experience is defined by how those sweet and bitter moments are arranged, and I think this is critical, how we perceive them.
And how we perceive them is key. The musical analogy also implies tempo and pace. Sometimes life is, an intense, fast-paced movement full of rapid-fire notes.
And other times it's an adagio, slow, reflective, even silent.
Exactly. And a conscious person understands that the silence, the rest, is just as much a part of the composition as the melody itself.
Whereas the heedless person,
The heedless person panics during the silence. They think the music has stopped altogether, that something is broken.
that distinction, the difference between perceiving the bitter notes as some kind of failure versus seeing them as a necessary dramatic shift in the music, that's exactly where the guide introduces its central operating solution.
Yeah, this is the pivot.
If life is this complex, contrasted performance, our response can't just be passive listening.
Right. We have to shift from being passive listeners to active conductors of our own experience. And this is why the guide immediately introduces Weibao, consciousness.
And the instruction is so clear. It says we must walk through the world with consciousness awareness. Namshi Faido Dunya Baiwei.
And this isn't just about being mindful in some vague passive sense. It's an imperative for intentionality, for observation.
To walk with consciousness, it implies that we're actively analyzing the score as we move through it. We're discerning the sweet from the bitter, observing the tempo, anticipating the shifts.
It's active engagement with reality, and this active vigilance state is defined by its opposition to the state of Ghafla.
The great enemy of the text.
It is. The text clearly warns that the alternative is to walk unconsciously because of our heedlessness. Masir bidunwai bi sabab gaflatina. And that sets up the fundamental conflict of the human condition in this text.
You called Ghafla spiritual sleepwalking earlier. Let's really unpack the symptoms of Ghafla for the modern learner. What does heedlessness actually look like in daily life?
Well, if Wei is intentional engagement, Ghafla is living on autopilot. It manifests as a constant, low-grade distraction, and it's often masked as busyness.
So, checking your phone every 2 minutes.
That's a classic symptom. Or think of the person who lives entirely for the weekend, completely disconnected from any value or purpose in the 5 days in between. That's Ghafla. Or the impulse buyer who gets no lasting joy from a purchase because the acquisition was just a reaction, not a conscious choice.
That's fascinating. So the symptoms are this constant consumption, whether it's media or goods, and it's coupled with a pervasive feeling that time is slipping away without any meaningful engagement.
Yes, the heedless person is mechanically present but existentially absent.
They're in the concert hall, but their mind is somewhere else.
Their internal focus is on their phone or their next appointment or some minor slight from yesterday. They're missing the entire composition because of all that internal static. And then when the bitter notes hit,
They're completely unprepared.
completely. They're shocked, they're devastated, they assume life is malfunctioning rather than recognizing that dissonance as a necessary part of the rhythm.
Which raises a really important question. If Ghafla, if this heedlessness is the default state, the path of least resistance, how do we even recognize when we're sliding into it beyond those symptoms we just mentioned?
The guide implies that the primary sign of Ghafla is a reliance on external validation and a really deep-seated fear of internal silence.
That's a powerful diagnostic tool.
It is. If you cannot tolerate being alone with your own thoughts, if you need constant noise or distraction to function, you are likely operating under the influence of heedlessness. Gua requires quiet introspection to process the music. Ghafla requires noise to drown it out.
So just to recap the foundation here, it starts with longing and love for beauty. The mechanism is the duality of the musical flow, and the necessary navigational tool is consciousness, or waya.
And the fundamental choice of existence is whether we walk with intent or surrender to that autopilot of heedlessness.
Which brings us right to section 2, where we figure out what this consciousness is actually meant to do.
What's its purpose?
Right. If the goal is to walk with awareness, what are we using that awareness for? And the guide is incredibly precise here.
It is.
The purpose of walking with awareness is fundamentally about discernment. We need awareness to know the truth and the illusion.
Ashan Narif al-Hakika wa al-Wam. This is where the guide transforms from philosophy into a practical toolkit for navigating modern cognitive overload.
How so?
Because the active primary function of wary is to differentiate haku or reality, truth from awam illusion, delusion. For the learner, for anyone who needs quick, accurate knowledge, this ability to filter truth from noise is probably the most valuable skill the guide promotes.
Okay, so let's define awam illusion in practical terms for today. If hakika is the recognition that life has both sweet and bitter notes, what kinds of illusions are we most susceptible to now?
Oh, there are several major modern illusions. One is the illusion of stability.
What do you mean by that?
The belief that if you just achieve a certain metric, a certain net worth, a job title, a specific relationship, you will achieve permanent emotional security and the bitter notes will just stop playing.
Which is a complete fantasy.
A total fantasy. Another is the illusion of external validation. The belief that your worth resides in how many people acknowledge you, how many likes you get, rather than in your internal ethical integrity.
And that connects perfectly back to Gafla. If you're heedless, you're so much more susceptible to these illusions. You're just sleepwalking through a field of tripwires.
You are. You accept the first explanation that comes along, the easiest distraction or the most comforting delusion that promises to spare you from the necessary difficulty of reality.
Because the truth, the hakuka, is often complex. It's messy. It demands continuous effort.
While the illusion awam is neat, simple, and promises shortcuts, Wei is the internal clarity that lets us look at a challenge and recognize it as a difficult but temporary component of reality. The illusion makes us believe the challenge defines our entire existence.
Or worse, that we're uniquely targeted by misfortune.
Exactly. So discerning truth becomes an act of resilience. But the guide doesn't just focus on our internal state. It immediately moves to how we should perceive external adversity, those inevitable challenges that make up the bitter notes.
And its description is so powerfully counterintuitive.
This is the paradox of life's cruelty. It uses this highly specific phrase, Kweswa daif, weak cruelty.
The core instruction is, no matter how cruel life is, its cruelty is weak and necessary, which we must bear and be patient with.
Mamakanat al-hayaf pasia fahuwa kwasa fori nataf maluhu wa nombira alahi.
I have to pause here because this is a lot to take in. We usually perceive life's cruelty, Kaswa, as overwhelming, powerful, even crushing. Why on earth would the guide label it weak, Daif? It seems like a massive mischaracterization of real suffering.
This is the absolute crux of the guide's perspective, and it's where the critical engagement is so vital. The guide is not denying the sharpness of the sting. It's not saying it doesn't hurt. It's analyzing the ultimate efficacy of the suffering. It labels the cruelty weak because fundamentally it lacks the power to destroy the conscious, intentional self.
Ah, okay, I see. So it's weak because it cannot force you to abandon your consciousness unless you surrender to it.
That's it.
It only has temporal, physical, or material power, but not spiritual or existential power over your internal choice.
Precisely. If you are aware of the truth, the hakika, you know this cruel moment is a finite, necessary, dramatic shift in the music. It is only powerful if we grant it that power through our gafla, if we confuse the bitter note for the whole symphony. The conscious person knows the limits of the cruelty.
But what about the other part of that phrase? If the cruelty is described as augury as necessary, doesn't that remove our agency in fighting it? How do we balance the required endurance, ta'amul, and patience, abra, with the need for resistance or, making things better?
That's a crucial question. The necessity of the cruelty does not negate action. It reframes the purpose of the action. We aren't fighting the existence of the difficulty because the bitter note must be played. We are fighting the illusion that the difficulty is eternal or that it has ultimate power over our internal state.
So the resistance is internal.
The required response endurance and patience is an internal resistance. It's a refusal to be psychologically destroyed by something that is inherently weak.
It's like building an inner fortress. We endure the external storm because we know the walls are strong and the storm will eventually pass. If we didn't endure, if we panicked, the weak cruelty would win by proxy.
And that endurance requires fuel. It's not a passive state.
Which brings us back to the earlier concept of duality. How do we find the strength to maintain this patience while we're enduring the weak cruelty?
And the guide has an answer.
It does. It instructs us to actively live on the sweet moments in life to cope with life's cruelty.
This is where we shift from just passive enjoyment to strategic consumption. We aren't seeking escapism in the sweet moments, we're seeking tactical sustenance. That's a great way to put it. The sweet moments are the cognitive reserves, the emotional oil, that allow the engine of the self to keep running smoothly despite the friction of adversity.
It implies a conscious practice then. You have to actively catalog the sweet moments. You can't just let them wash over you while you're in a state of ghafla.
No, if you consciously appreciate the moment of connection, the small success, the moment of beauty, you are building a reservoir of truth that you can draw upon when the illusion of total hardship threatens to overwhelm you.
So the conscious person is using gratitude and appreciation as a form of future planning. They're investing in their own resilience.
They have to. If we only operate in the realm of the bitter, we burn out rapidly, and that weak cruelty suddenly gains the power to immobilize us entirely. We have to actively remember that the music contains consonance, even when we're currently immersed in dissonance.
This continuous effort to remember the good, rely on the reserves, and accept the necessity of the bitter, that's the daily practice that keeps the cruelty weak.
The minute you forget the sweetness, the suffering appears eternal, and therefore, it appears overwhelmingly powerful.
So the lesson here is clear. The ability to differentiate truth from illusion and manage hardship hinges entirely on maintaining Weidi. Which brings us to the next section, where we transition from this internal mindset to external behavior and influence. Because the guide is very clear that this individual fight for consciousness cannot be won in isolation.
You cannot do it alone.
Okay, so we've established the mindset: consciousness, patience, and resilience built from those sweet, consciously appreciated moments. Now, the guide gives us a clear ethical roadmap for external life. It defines the world's moral structure as having a bifurcated path.
The world has paths of good and evil. Adunya Uruk Karwa Shar.
It's a very definitive moral framework. The guide leaves no room for ambiguous middle ground here.
No. There is the path of good, Kair, and the path of evil, Shar. And for the learner, I think the simplicity is its strength. Complex moral frameworks can often lead to analysis paralysis, which is itself a form of ghafla. This guide demands a clear choice.
And the primary directive that follows this realization is framed in terms of self-preservation. It's immediate and forceful.
Protect yourself by walking the paths of good and do not walk the paths of evil. The act of choosing good is presented as the ultimate act of self-defense.
So straying into the paths of evil isn't just a social transgression. It's inherently suicidal to one's own peace and consciousness.
Exactly. You choose good not primarily for others, but to save yourself from internal ruin and the eventual existential loss that's promised later in the text.
But the guide doesn't stop at merely walking the path. That might imply a sort of passive movement in the correct direction. It introduces a much more active, a much more muscular concept.
The continuous effort of holding fast.
Right.
That's the key actionable insight that elevates the guidance beyond simple ethics. Instructs us to actively hold on to the good and do not hold on to the evil. Imsik fi al-khair wala tumsik fi ashar.
Imsik.
The verb imsik means to grasp, to grip tightly, to refuse to let go.
Let's spend a moment on this difference. What is the distinction between passively walking the good path and actively holding on to the good?
Well, walking might mean you generally intend to be a good person, you follow the laws, you don't actively seek out harm. But holding fast implies continuous, moment-by-moment vigilance against temptation and ethical slippage.
So it's more dynamic.
It is. Think of it like climbing a mountain on a fixed line. Walking is just putting one foot in front of the other. Holding fast means your hands are clamped onto that rope, absorbing the shock of every loose rock, and refusing to let go when exhaustion hits.
So the challenge isn't the initial choice of direction. It's the continuous low-level effort to overcome the friction that is constantly trying to pull you back toward shar, toward evil.
It suggests that good is not the default state. It requires dynamic force to maintain. And that force is necessary because the path of evil often looks easier, more immediately gratifying, and less demanding of patience.
So if you slip into ghafla, even for a moment,
The grip loosens. Insik is the antidote to the temptation of ethical laziness.
and the stakes for feeling this active directive are presented in just absolute terms. The guide warns against falling into evil that will make you lose everything. That phrase, lose everything, is chilling.
If ghafla causes you to be merely lost, to lose your bearing active engagement with Shar causes existential annihilation. It's the loss of your capacity for way, the loss of internal integrity, the loss of those reserves of sweet moments.
The ultimate loss of future peace. It suggests that evil consumes the very possibility of achieving the abundant good.
It is a comprehensive moral bankruptcy, and this strong warning emphasizes that ethical choices are not minor adjustments. They determine your ultimate accumulation or loss of self.
Yet, immediately after framing this intensely personal active struggle, the guide makes an immediate critical pivot.
To the necessity of community.
You cannot succeed alone.
And this is the genius of the text. It recognizes that individual willpower is simply insufficient against the gravitational pull of Shar and Ghafla.
So what's the instruction?
The core detail here is a social imperative. Love the people of good from among mankind. Al-ahayr min annas.
And the rationale for this love is phrased, again, as a survival mechanism. It says this connection is essential so that you do not get lost in life.
Good people act as guideposts, as ethical anchors. This is the guide's focus on social ecology. It explains, because you live by the companionship of the people of good.
Let's really explore this survival strategy angle.
Yeah.
Why is companionship with al-Khair, the people of good, so absolutely vital for our way?
Because Ghafla is contagious, and Awam, illusion, is reinforced socially. If you surround yourself with people who live habitually in heedlessness, people who prioritize fleeting distractions, who constantly gossip, who normalize shortcuts and moral compromises, their environment will inevitably pull you down.
It's the echo chamber effect.
It is. Toxic company reinforces the illusion that the easier, darker path is normal. It makes your effort to hold fast feel impossibly difficult and isolating.
And it makes the weak cruelty feel strong.
It does. Al-Khair, by contrast, provide the necessary friction. They function as external monitors for your consciousness. They are the ones who, when you start to slide toward heedlessness, or when you begin to mistake illusion for truth, call you back.
So they reinforce the good path.
They make it easier to hold on to. They remind you of the sweetness you have consciously cataloged.
This raises an important question then. Is the instruction to love the people of good a call to judgment, or is it a practical call to select our environment carefully?
I think it's entirely practical selection. The love mentioned here is a deep recognition of their value to your own existential survival. You love them because they maintain the environment that's necessary for your vigilance.
So it's not about judging those on the path of Shar.
No, but it's about realizing that engaging in deep companionship with them guarantees your own loss. You have to consciously choose people who make your effort to remain awake easier, not harder.
So the people we choose are not just companions, they are co-authors of our consciousness. If the people around you are operating in Ghafla, they are actively sabotaging your ability to walk the conscious path.
Whereas if they are al-Khair, they serve as shock absorbers against the world's inevitable cruelty and as beacons when the truth gets murky. It's an ecological requirement for sustained internal peace.
The maintenance of good company ensures the continuous supply of external reinforcement for your internal choice.
And without that support system, the lonely struggle against heedlessness is often lost, which leads to that definitive state of being lost hog because of your own Ghafla.
Okay, so we've established the map, the compass, and the essential crew. But the guide is realistic. Even with the best intentions and the best company, we are fallible. We slip up. We are susceptible to Ghafla.
It knows we're human, so the guide returns to that central danger, reinforcing the consequence of heedlessness.
And it serves as the ultimate sober warning. It states, if heedlessness occurs to you in the world, you will be lost because of your heedlessness.
The loss, pacha, is not presented as a punitive act. It's a direct and inevitable consequence of the absence of awareness of your Ghaflatak.
It's cause and effect. If you are walking on autopilot in a dynamic landscape filled with dualities, illusions, and ethical choices, you are destined to drift off course.
You simply lose your bearing, your sense of purpose, and your connection to reality. Being lost is an existential crisis born of distraction.
But the guide, having warned us so starkly about the danger of Ghafla, immediately offers a profoundly redeeming feature of the very adversity we discussed earlier.
The trials themselves are the corrective mechanism.
This is the function of adversity, or ibtila, the guide states. The trials of the world awaken you from your heedlessness. Ibtila ad-dunya tafawwiqak min ghaflatak.
This reframes the entire discussion of life's cruelty, the qaswa from Section 2. We said the cruelty was weak and necessary. Now we understand why it is necessary.
But purpose becomes clear.
Adversity is not merely something to endure patiently. It is a necessary, perhaps even merciful, corrective mechanism. It's the high-volume alarm clock designed to shock us out of our spiritual sleepwalking.
That makes so much sense. Because if life were uniformly easy and sweet, We would have no reason to exercise Wei. We would likely sleep forever in comfort, confusing temporary ease with ultimate truth.
The pain of the trial forces an immediate shift in focus.
What's the specific mechanism in a trial that forces awareness?
It's the loss of certainty. When a trial hits, a financial difficulty, a health crisis, a relational collapse, the illusions awam that we were relying on are instantly shattered. Our normal coping mechanisms fail.
And you're forced to stop.
You are forced to stop, look around, and conduct an immediate, intense reassessment of your priorities and your path. And this forced reassessment is the activation of Wei.
So the weakness of the cruelty lies in the fact that its ultimate goal is not to destroy us, but to save us from the profound danger of self-inflicted heedlessness.
Yes. The bitterness is designed to ensure we appreciate and use the sweetness, and the hardship is designed to keep us vigilant. The trial is inherently pedagogical. It's a teaching moment.
So if you are lost, the pain forces you to activate your consciousness, find the good path again, and hold fast to it with renewed strength.
The guide posits that trials are the world's way of ensuring that humans who possess the capacity for Wei are eventually driven back to use it.
And what is the reward for accepting this pain as an alarm clock, for maintaining this state of continuous vigilance? The guide concludes with a magnificent promise.
The ultimate reward of vigilance.
The promise is absolute, and it defines the ultimate goal state for a human being.
If you live vigilant awake in life, abundant good will come to you, and worry and sorrow will disappear.
Let's linger on this state of Yakoth vigilance. This is the sustained, perfected state of Wei. The reward is twofold. First, abundant good comes to you. Al-Khair al-Kathir.
And this isn't just prosperity. It's an overflowing, comprehensive benefit. It's the return on investment for having continuously chosen the path of good, held fast to your ethical choices, and surrounded yourself with al-Khair.
But the truly profound outcome is the second part, the complete disappearance of worry and sorrow.
Alham wa alos nyaktafyan. The text doesn't say these negative states will be minimized or managed or tolerated. It says they will disappear. This isn't standard psychological advice. This is an existential promise.
Which suggests that worry, alham, and sorrow, al-huzn, are not external pressures that must be endured. They're internal psychological states rooted deeply in ghafla and illusion.
Exactly. If you are fully vigilant, if you are Yakoth, what is left to worry about?
I mean, you know the truth, that the music is dual, that the bitterness is necessary but weak, and you are actively holding fast to the good path with supportive company.
And in that state of certainty, preparedness, and alignment, the conditions that breed anxiety and existential sorrow just vanish. Worry and sorrow are the psychological debris left over from mistaking the illusion for the truth. Vigilance eliminates the illusion.
It's an internal revolution. It means the conscious self is so firmly rooted in reality and ethical alignment that external events, even the necessary bitter notes, can no longer destabilize its core.
This is far beyond mere happiness. This is profound, sustained inner peace.
So it's a formula for existential success distilled into a simple equation.
Conscious living, Wei, plus ethical alignment and good company, al-Khair, equals abundant peace, which is marked by the complete disappearance of distress. The guide offers the learner a complete philosophical and practical architecture for a life free of the crushing weight of existential fear.
And the beauty of it is that every single step connects back to the starting point. The necessity of that original longing for beauty. If you maintain that love, if you walk consciously, and if you choose your companions wisely, you're ensuring that the inevitable adversity of life acts only as an alarm clock.
And never as an executioner.
So this deep dive into A Guide to Life has taken us through some incredibly dense terrain, from the philosophical architecture of duality to the surprisingly practical mechanics of maintaining internal vigilance.
It covers a lot of ground in a short space.
It does, but we've extracted these core actionable principles. The need for conscious discernment between truth and illusion, the tactical use of patience and those sweet moments as fuel against what it calls weak cruelty.
And of course, the absolute necessity of ethical alignment, which is reinforced by good companionship.
What's fascinating here, and I think what changes the entire perspective on struggle, is that the text gives suffering, the trials, the Abtila at a noble, positive purpose.
It ensures the enduring value of Wei. It is not punishment. It is an alarm clock designed to pull us out of the dangerous state of heedlessness, of ghafla.
The true goal, then, is not eliminating challenge. That's impossible, because the rhythm must have bitter notes. The goal is eliminating the unconscious response to that challenge.
That distinction changes everything. It shifts the focus from managing uncontrollable external difficulty to maintaining rigorous, manageable internal vigilance.
It means we stop asking, why is this happening to me? And we start asking, what is this moment trying to wake me up from?
Absolutely. The commitment to consciousness is a lifetime job, but the reward, that complete disappearance of worry and sorrow, is the ultimate peace.
And that leads us to the final provocative thought for you, the listener. This guide instructs us to know the truth and the illusion. In a world saturated with information and distraction, and given the existential cost of Ghafla, what is the one illusion, that lie you tell yourself about stability, security, or self-worth, that you are actively choosing to discard this week to achieve a greater state of vigilance of Yakuth?
What false certainty are you willing to let go of to know the truth?
And to start drawing closer to that abundant good.
Something to mull over as you seek out that good and choose your companions wisely.
We'll see you next time on The Deep Dive.